Hey guys. Tonight we'll travel back to an era where love didn't just break hearts, it melted the map of Europe and kept Britain awake for decades. Trying to maintain the balance of power. Picture this. A cold marble hallway in Paris. Candlelight flickering against gilded portraits. Outside, cannons boom in the distance. Inside, a man in a velvet blue military coat stands motionless, staring at a letter penned in soft, tender handwriting written by the hand of a widow. That man is none other than Napoléon Bonaparte. And the woman Joséphine, an older widow, a former lover who once betrayed him, an empress who never officially wore the crown. And yet, in his final breath, he whispered her name. Yes, tonight, we're stepping into a story that's romantic, politically twisted, and just heartbreaking enough to make you say, I'm not sure I'm gonna survive these next 30 minutes. Don't worry, I'll tell it slowly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you can, drop a comment and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? It may seem small, but knowing we're sharing the same moment even from opposite sides of the globe somehow makes the night feel a little softer. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. To be honest, Napoleon didn't meet Joséphine in the middle of a battlefield or in some cinematic romantic setting. There were no harps playing, no dreamy moonlight, just a Parisian salon filled with thick perfume and the murmurs of fallen aristocrats after the revolution. The year was 1795. Napoléon Bonaparte, 6 years old. Single, not tall, a bit thin, with a bony face and often mocked for his strange accent. If you're picturing a rugged general on a white horse with icy eyes, I'm sorry, you've just wandered into a Hollywood movie. And her? Marie-Joseph Rose Tacher de la Pagerie, 32 years old. Originally from Martinique, having just survived the terror. Having lost her husband, he was guillotined. Though she, luckily, kept her neck. At this point, you might wonder, why would someone like Napoleon fall head over heels for someone like Joséphine? The answer lies in two things. One, she had a dreamy, elusive beauty and spoke as softly as a morning breeze. Two, she didn't love him back. And nothing lights a fire under an ambitious young man quite like a woman who ignores him, while the whole city ignores them both. Joséphine knew politicians, was used to being courted, knew she was desirable. She was once called a camellia by a man far more powerful than Napoleon, cold and thorny. And Napoleon, just newly promoted to general, was naively writing love letters like a schoolboy. In one of his early letters, he wrote, I can't eat, can't sleep. You don't write to me. Do you love me? Or am I just a dreamer? See, that's not the voice of an emperor. That's a simp in revolutionary France. Joséphine, she didn't reply. Or if she did, it was weeks later, while Napoleon was fighting in Italy. Joséphine was attending parties, occasionally flirting with some deputies, sometimes even swapping hats with another young officer. And that's exactly why Napoleon loved her so much. Because in a world where everyone wanted Napoleon's attention, only Joséphine acted as if he was just another errand boy. By 1796, they were married. The wedding wasn't grand. Napoleon was in such a rush, he forgot to write his real age. He added 2 years so he'd seem older than his wife. And Joséphine subtracted 3 years so she wouldn't look like the groom's older sister. A match made in heaven, bonded by vanity and lies. Right after the wedding, Napoleon set off for the Italian campaign. He thought, I've won her. Now just a few victories, and all of France will adore her the way I do. But you know what? While he fired cannons, and wrote love letters that read like Shakespeare laced with military strategy. Joséphine didn't read them, or if she did, she skimmed halfway and went to bed. At times, she went on holiday with another lover. When Napoleon found out, he raged like Zeus, writing furious letters, screaming on paper, "You've betrayed me, you're the light of my life. Why would you darken me so?" Then 3 lines later, he added, "But still, I love you, write to me." Just 1 line. That's all I ask. If you're feeling heartbroken for him right now, congratulations, you understand Napoleon better than half of modern historians. And so, their love continued, furious, full of hope, but with no guarantees. Napoleon, the man who would later conquer all of Europe, was powerless before a woman named Rose, who once combed her hair while he wrote pages upon pages of love letters. Joséphine wasn't cold. She just didn't burn the way he did, and maybe that's exactly why he never managed to extinguish the fire she lit inside him. If you're lying in bed, lights off, just the soft glow of your screen and the slow hum of the fan, take a deep breath. Because the next part of this love story will take you to a place where history and the heart both grow weary. In 1804, Napoléon Bonaparte, the same man who once penned jealous love letters from a battlefield tent, was now Emperor of France. Not by royal blood, not by divine right, but through talent, sheer will, and a hefty dose of cosmic ego. And yes, once he had the crown, he decided Joséphine would be empress. The only small issue, Joséphine wasn't so sure she agreed. The coronation at Notre Dame Cathedral that December was a symbolic spectacle staged like a royal opera. There was a pope, music, ceremony, but when it came time to place the crown on the empress's head, Napoleon did something no one dared to do. He crowned Joséphine himself, not by church tradition, not waiting for Rome's blessing, just a man still in love with a woman and wanting the whole world to see it. If you think that was the romantic climax of their story, let me remind you, this is history, not a Disney movie. In truth, their marriage was already rotting from within. Joséphine was still radiant, still charming, still smiling softly at banquets, but she couldn't bear children. And in a world of thrones, crowns, and wars, that wasn't just a misfortune. It was a political threat of the highest order. Napoleon needed an heir, not to have a kid for fun, but to protect the empire he'd built with gunpowder and grit. Picture a man who once shattered the Austrian army at Austerlitz, now sitting silently as the doctor delivers the news. "No, Your Majesty, she cannot bear another child." "How?" He said nothing, just nodded and walked out of the room, quieter than when he retreated from Russia after losing 500,000 men. And then, the inevitable came. After countless nights of reflection, after months of inner turmoil, Napoleon, the man who once crumbled beneath cold letters, now had to become the one to say goodbye. He summoned Joséphine to the Tuileries Palace. No one else was there, just the two of them. She sat on a chair, wearing a pale white dress, her hands trembling slightly. He stood, hands clasped behind his back, as if on trial before his own heart. "Joséphine, you are the only woman I've ever loved, but I must divorce you for the future of France." No one shouted. No one slammed the table. There was no television drama scene. Just a man saying the rightest thing his heart never wanted to say. That night, Joséphine left the palace not in disgrace, but with silent respect. Napoleon gave her the Château de Malmaison, the honorary title of empress. Money, servants, a garden full of flowers. But what he couldn't give and what she couldn't keep was love. In the right place, at the right time. A year later, he married Marie-Louise, an Austrian princess, nearly 20 years younger, of pure royal lineage, and very obedient. They had a son, Napoleon II, whom all of Europe called the future king. Oh, the love story seemed to end there. Napoleon had a son. Joséphine had her chateau. Everyone settled. But no, love, if it's real, doesn't know what a logical ending is. Napoleon went on to fight. To win. Then lose big. When he was defeated, exiled to Elbon, upper-class prison, the first person he wrote to was Joséphine. I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but you know, I still remember those afternoons at Malmaison. When you laughed and trimmed the hydrangeas. Joséphine received the letter, but couldn't reply. She was ill. Her lungs were weak. And then, 1 month before Napoleon escaped Elba to return to France, died. In a quiet room, surrounded by floral paintings. She whispered on her deathbed, "Napoleon will triumph." When Napoleon heard the news, he said nothing for 2 days. They say he just stood by the window, staring into the misty sky, and whispered, "I conquered the world, but I couldn't keep one woman." The wind on St. Helena didn't feel like anywhere else. It didn't carry the scent of snow like Austerlitz, nor the gunpowder of Waterloo, nor the fragrance of camellias from the gardens of Malmaison, where Joséphine once walked under the soft afternoon light. It was just wind. Empty, whirling around a worn house called Longwood, where a man who was once emperor of all Europe now lay, without an army, without a throne, and without her. In 1815, after his defeat at Waterloo, Napoleon was handed over to the British, and as if history hadn't been cruel enough, they decided not to behead him. No trial, no exile with dignity, but to send him to the middle of the ocean, to an island so small, even birds couldn't be bothered to fly over it. St. Helena, isolated, silent, a perfect place to lock up the past and bolt the door on memory. The house he was granted Longwood bore no resemblance to a palace. Damp plaster walls, leaky roof, a dining table with a broken leg, carpets chewed by rats. Meals often consisted of cold soup, salted meat as tough as rubber, and a bit of low-grade wine. Napoleon, who once dined by candlelight at Versailles with silver cutlery, now shared rooms with rats and listened to guards sneezing every night. Once, he told a servant, "Here, I won't die of illness, but of sorrow." He wrote letters, so many that even ink began to fear him. Wrote about history, military tactics, and Joséphine. Yes, Joséphine, who had died in 1814, a quiet death, no alarms, no gunfire, no at the funeral. She passed with fading breath, in a still room, where a few flowers were wilting. Napoleon couldn't be there. He was still imprisoned on Elba, caught between escape plans and censored letters. When he heard the news of her death, he stood frozen at a window for 3 hours. No words, no food, no sleep. Only when the sky darkened did he speak. "I conquered all of Europe, but I couldn't hold on to the heart of one woman. And now, there's nothing left to hold." The days on St. Helena blurred together like a dream, without waking. In the mornings, he walked alone in the garden. At noon, he read. In the afternoons, he wrote memoirs. At night, he stared at the sea. Some days, the guards saw him standing for hours in the wind, eyes distant, as if waiting for someone to emerge from the fog. A servante asked. Are you expecting news? He only shook his head and smiled faintly. I'm waiting for memory to return. His body weakened. Stomach pain. Ashen skin. Restless sleep. Doctors offered all kinds of diagnoses from cancer to stomach ulcers. Some even suspected poisoning. But the truth was simpler. He was dying from no longer having a reason to live. No more battles to win. No more crowds to cheer. No more woman named Joséphine to write letters to. Only himself surrounded by ocean like a question no one would ever answer. In May 1821, the illness worsened. Napoleon lay bedridden. Pâle. His gaze unfocused. In a feverish haze. He whispered broken French words. France, l'armée, tête d'armée, France, the army, the leading general, and then a name not included in the official record but clearly heard by his servants. Joséphine. That was the final word. A man who once reshaped history with bare hands, shattered the largest alliance in Europe, dared to crown himself, now departed with a whispered name, as if history had ended, but love had not. His body was buried on the island, beneath an unmarked stone. No crown, no flowers, no family, only the wind and a few silent guards, unsure whether to feel honored or mournful. Years later, France requested his remains. He was brought back to Paris, buried at Les Invalides, beneath a gilded tomb, under grand flags. But beneath all the glory still lay a small man, a heart that never let go, and a final whisper sent to someone no longer there to hear it. Are you still here? If so, close your eyes and imagine standing in the gardens of Malmaison, where Joséphine once walked lightly through the morning mist, and Napoleon sat nearby, holding a letter never answered. No more war, no more throne, just two people, a love, and all the things that might have been different had they met in a more ordinary time. Before the passionate love letters to Joséphine, before the crown and the title, Emperor of France, Napoléon Bonaparte was just a Corsican boy with a strange voice and eyes that never looked down. You know Corsica, don't you? That windy Mediterranean island between Italy and France, known for raising more rowers than emperors. The Bonaparte family wasn't old nobility. They were elevated through loyalty to France, just as Corsica was gently annexed. And Napoleon, born in 1769, the fourth of 8 children. As a child, he hated the French for taking his island. But ironically, it was France that gave him a scholarship. So, in 1779, at 9 years old, the boy left the island for the mainland, enrolling at Briannia Military School for the noble-born. And the only problem? Napoleon wasn't the kind of noble they had in mind. He spoke French with a thick Corsican accent that made classmates think he was singing opera, mocked for being thin, tangent-skinned, blunt in speech. And yet something strange happened. Instead of retreating, Napoleon quietly buried himself in books of history. War and battle formations like others solved geometry. While his classmates played, Napoleon devoured tales of Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Alexander the Great. Once, a teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" He replied, curtly, "To conquer." In 1785, at just 16 years old, Napoleon graduated early, becoming a second lieutenant in the artillery, assigned to Valence. At that age in France, most boys either got married or became clerks. But Napoleon chose to sit alone, drawing maps and writing tactical theories. Picture a skinny teenager with a strange accent. No dance skills, obsessed with calculating artillery supply routes, and you'll understand why no girl dared come near. A few years later, the French Revolution erupted. The monarchy was overthrown. Beheadings became the national sport. It was a time when anyone with brains and guts could rise. In 1793, Napoleon took part in the siege of Toulon, a port city held by royalists and backed by the British Navy. There, Napoleon proved something. Victory wasn't about having more cannons, it was about knowing where to place them. He proposed positioning artillery on high ground, aiming directly at the harbor and enemy ships. The result? Revolutionary forces captured Toulon. The British withdrew, and Napoleon was promoted to general at just 24 years old. From a lonely cadet mocked for his accent, he became the youngest military hero in France. You'd think life would roll out the red carpet from there? No, because the following year, Napoleon got involved with the wrong political faction. He was abandoned, demoted, unemployed, spending days at home, reading and eating boiled noodles. This was the kind of moment that, if you were making a film, would be shot in gray tones, with somber music, and a rear camera angle showing him silently staring out at the rain. But then, history always mischievous threw him an opportunity no one else dared to take. In October 1795, in Paris, royalists staged an uprising. Their numbers far outmatched the forces defending the government. Panic spread, and the government called on just one man. Find that short Corsican artillery guy, Bonaparte or something. Ask if he can clean up this mess. Napoleon arrived, surveyed quickly, then ordered cannons loaded with iron nails to be placed along the Paris boulevards. When the insurgents charged, he showed no mercy, fired directly into the crowd. Paris fell silent within an hour. And from that day on, whispers began. Bonaparte doesn't just win battles, he dares to do what others won't even think. After that, Napoleon was appointed commander of the Army of Italy. And just months later, he began a series of campaigns that would shake all of Europe. From here, he was no longer a short artillery officer. He became what they called the thunderbolt of the revolution, a tactical genius, and eventually the man who would keep every royal house in Europe awake at night. Still awake? If so, imagine yourself standing atop the hills of Toulon in 1793, your coat billowing in the wind, and a young man with eyes that never blink pointing into the distance. Place the cannon there. We'll win with strategy. Anyone who wants to leave, go. I'll write my name on the map. In 1796, France was as tangled as a ball of yarn in a catfight. Inside full of warring factions. Outside the entire continent united. Eager to teach the revolution a lesson. And in one of those moments only history could comprehend, the French provisional government decided, Italy is critical. Send Bonaparte. Remember? Napoleon now Huson hot. Small in stature. And thin, with a thick Corsican accent. But the same man who had cleared the streets of Paris with cannon fire in a single afternoon, and so he was named Commander-in-Chief of the Army of Italy. Congratulations. Well, not quite. Because this so-called army he received was basically a band of starving soldiers. Unpaid, shoeless, surviving on dry noodles mixed with pebbles, and on the verge of going home. On his first day in command, Napoleon didn't fire a shot. He gave a speech. You're hungry. I know. You're barefoot. I see it. But beyond these mountains lies Italy, land of fine wine, white bread, vineyards, and gold. Come with me. I have nothing to offer but victory. Strangely enough, they followed. not because they believed in him yet, but because they hated their current reality more. And so the Italian campaign began. Napoleon led a ragged army with nothing but spirit and the mind of a genius yet to be acknowledged. Within weeks, he defeated the Austrians at Montenotte, swept the Sardinians, signed a treaty forcing the King of Sardinia to surrender, stormed down the Po Valley like a hurricane in worn-out boots. Napoleon didn't fight like traditional generals, while others thought flank, defend, divide. He thought concentrate, strike their weakest point, win fast, then make them sign papers. At the Battle of Lodi, he personally led the charge across a bridge under heavy cannon fire, leaving the entire army stunned. The soldiers looked at each other, silently thinking, well, if that skinny general isn't scared, then what the hell are we afraid of? From then on, they nicknamed him the Little Corporal, not to mock his height, but because he acted like one of them. And then he entered Milan, riding through the city gates like it was a royal wedding. People threw flowers. Nobles bowed. The French army, once starving and miserable, were now eating spaghetti and discussing art. But Napoleon didn't stop there. He began learning how to rule. In Milan, he reorganized the government, ordered soldiers not to loot civilians, wrote 14-page reports to Paris weekly, part budget requests, part self-praise. One famous line he wrote about Italian politics: "Here, everyone talks a lot, but when it's time to fight, they drink coffee." Oh, and then came the Battle of Arcole. The Austrians blocked every road. Thinking they had him cornered, Napoleon ordered a makeshift bridge built overnight. Through mud and gunfire, when his troops hesitated, he grabbed the flag, charged to the front of the bridge, and shouted, "Are you soldiers or hens? Follow me." They followed. Victory. By the end of the campaign, he signed the Treaty of Campo Formio, forcing Austria to give up most of Italy, pay reparations, and sit still. France was bankrupt at the time, and Napoleon sent home a wagon of gold. The Paris government opened the letter and found an invoice attached, an old Italian crown, a few ancient statues, and a note sending a few pretty things for the Louvre. This is how Napoleon began, enriching France's art collection, though later it would get a bit excessive. Now you understand why a short young man from Corsica had all of Paris speaking his name every day. Napoleon wasn't just a brilliant general, he was an event. A storm of logic and recklessness, a military mind without a map, a politician without a parliament, a genius who didn't wait to be called one. Still with me? If your eyes are getting heavy, imagine yourself standing on the bridge at Arcole, wind tossing your hair, and a man holding a flag turning back to shout, "This is the battle for those who dare to dream big." And in 1797, Napoleon returned from Italy like a movie star stepping off the screen, but instead of a handsome face, he brought victories, war spoils, and some Greek statues the French hadn't yet learned to name. Paris erupted. Children shouted, "Vive Bonaparte!" Aristocratic women swooned. Artists raced to paint him atop a mountain with a sword, though in truth, he often rode a donkey on mountain roads because horses slipped too much. Napoleon Once, a ragged artillery officer, was now a national hero. The government, which always feared anyone becoming too popular, started to worry. If this guy keeps winning, people might start asking him to be king. So they offered a friendly proposal. "General Bonaparte, would you like to lead a campaign a bit farther away? Italy was great. But how about Egypt?" Egypt. It sounded absurd. But at the time, France wanted to block British influence in India, and Egypt was the strategic midpoint. Naturally, Napoleon lit up at the idea. Egypt? Sure. I'll bring French civilization to the land of the pharaohs. Truthfully, he also wanted to stay busy and avoid political traps in Paris. So in 1798, Napoleon set sail with 40 soldiers and 167 scientists, painters, architects, and scholars. This was the only military campaign in history that included a scorpion researcher and a statue sketch artist. They called it a civilizing mission. But in reality it meant, we're going to take your land but tastefully. And see, the journey was long and exhausting. Their ships crossed the Mediterranean and reached Alexandria. French troops stepped onto hot sand, met by desert winds and unfriendly camels. Immediately upon arrival, they clashed with the Mamluks' traditional cavalry in armor, riding like Hollywood warriors. Napoleon observed, then quietly said, "Beautiful. Yes, but they don't have cannons." Huh. And it was true. At the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon had his troops form square formations, cannons at each corner, muskets at the center. The Mamluk cavalry charged in, shouting, "Allah!" Cannon roared. Horses turned, dust clouds rose, and the French soldiers stood still, like statues in a museum. Victory belonged to Napoleon. No one climbed the pyramids. There was no romantic sword duel under the moonlight. Only discipline, tactics, and a very Napoleonic line. From the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries looked down upon you. While the army fought, the scholars dug up artifacts, sketched statues, copied hieroglyphs, wrote books on bugs, flowers, climate, and one fine day, they discovered something that would change history: the Rosetta Stone, a slab inscribed with the same text in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Thanks to it, humanity would later decode the language of the Nile civilization. So, in a military campaign, Napoleon accidentally helped the world understand Egyptian history books. Not bad. But then, as always, the British arrived. Admiral Horatio Nelson, a British hero, spotted the French fleet anchored at Aboukir Bay. No speeches. Nelson attacked that night. The result? The entire French fleet was destroyed. Napoleon was stranded in Egypt. No way home. No reinforcements. No more French toiletries. The campaign moved to Syria. Napoleon led his troops across the desert, won a few small battles, but was halted at the fortress of Acre. Wounded, sick, troops thinning, and so, after over a year of armed tourism, he decided to quietly leave the army behind, boarded a small ship, and returned to France. A defeat? You think? No, because when he landed back in Paris, the public had no idea how badly Egypt had gone. All they knew was, Bonaparte is back, Bonaparte is alive, Bonaparte is glorious. Oh, it helped that there was no internet. Information control worked very well. And just a few months after his return, Napoleon, with his fame, loyal army, and a handful of disillusioned politicians, overthrew the old government in a quiet coup. He became first consul, holding absolute power, needing just one more step to become emperor. We've seen Napoleon conquer Italy, shake Egypt, and return to Paris like an ancient god stepping down from a chariot, except without thunderbolts. Only a coup plan. By late 1799, France was exhausted. The government was a mess, like a crepe folded the wrong way. Unstable politics, scattered civil wars, empty treasury, and citizens sighing long enough to stretch down the Champs-Élysées. And so Napoleon stepped in, delivering a line no one would forget. France needs a strong hand. Don't worry, I have two. On the 9th of November, 1799, he carried out a smooth coup, known as the Coup of 18 Brumaire. No bloodshed, no bombs, just walked into the legislature, said a few terrifying words, and let his loyal generals invite the politicians out of their seats. A new government was formed, called the Consulate. 3 men were co-leaders, but everyone knew the other 2 were there just for appearances. Napoleon was first consul, meaning the boss with absolute power. In short, he was prime minister, president, walking legal code, and Napoleon himself. But Napoleon wasn't just good at coups. He dove into real reform. France at the time was basically a corrupted Excel spreadsheet. Every region had its own system of measurements. Every court made its own rulings. Paperwork read like existential literature reads in. Still no idea what it said. Napoleon said, "I don't like chaos. Chaos isn't beautiful." So he started rewriting the legal system, not just fixing but building it from scratch. The result, the Napoleonic Civil Code, also known as the Napoleonic Code. It declared civil liberty as a basic right, protection of private property, equality before the law, abolition of noble privileges, and women not having the same rights as men because that was the era. And Napoleon wasn't exactly a gender progressive. Still, the code influenced the entire world from Europe and Latin America to the Middle East. Today, over 70 countries still base their legal systems on it. Meaning, Napoleon didn't just conquer with guns, she invaded law school curriculums. Beyond law, he also reformed education, created elite secondary schools called Lycée Train Smart, disciplined and properly patriotic students, founded the Bank of France to prevent oligarch bankers from wrecking the economy, reorganized taxation, no more local officials creatively interpreting tax rules, created the Legion of Honor, a medal for contributors of any background. In short, Napoleon built France like someone playing Sim City, very seriously. But then, in 1804, he felt it still wasn't enough. Sitting as first consul, signing papers, patting generals on the back, it was all fine. But if he'd already done so much, why not go all the way and become emperor? You know what? Right then, an assassination plot against him was uncovered, and the whole nation panicked. The government said, "You must be protected." The press said, "You are the father of France." The people said, "Yes, we agree." And so, on the 2nd of December, 1896, at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, amidst glowing candles, thunderous choir music, and the presence of Pope Pius VII, Napoleon crowned himself. Not the Pope. No one handed it to him. I receive power from no one. I choose myself, and the world will have to accept it. Joséphine stood there in a white gown, as he placed the second crown upon her, Empress of France. You remember? We told that part before. From here, the first consul became Emperor Napoleon I. Monarchy returned, but a monarchy born of a former private. He had gone from a boy mocked for his voice to a man who redrew the map of Europe and rewrote the entire legal foundation of his country. Of course, behind the glitter were signs visible only to the keen-eyed, an ambition with no bottom, neighboring nations in panic, and Napoleon beginning to believe he could never be wrong. Still there, if you're lying still, Picture yourself sitting in a cathedral pew in Paris in 1804, surrounded by nervous nobles, while up above stands a short man with a cold expression, slowly raising the crown to his own head, with a look that seems to say, God may keep heaven, but two will take Europe. When Napoleon crowned himself in 1804, he didn't just place a crown on his head. He took on the ambition of Caesar, the weight of Alexander the Great, and the confidence of a man who believed he could not fail. And in the years that followed, strangely enough, he didn't. From 1805 to 1809, he successively crushed the Third Coalition, Britain, Austria, Russia, at Austerlitz, also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, took Vienna as easily as a tourist visiting a museum, shattered Prussia within weeks, and forced Austria to marry off its princess to him, Marie-Louise. Despite him divorcing Joséphine in tears, Europe looked at the map and sighed. France, under Napoleon, now stretched from the Atlantic coast to near Moscow. Smaller nations vanished. Pro-French kingdoms sprouted like mushrooms after rain. And Napoleon's brothers, one by one, crowned kings here and there. But as with every mythic tale, once you hold the world in your hands, you ask yourself, who hasn't bowed to me yet? And Napoleon looked east, to a land cold, vast, unreadable, and snowier than necessary, Russia. In truth, he and Tsar Alexander I had once been allies. They'd embraced by the Niemen River, laughed and promised peace. But then, for all sorts of reasons, trade, pride, broken treaties, relations grew as cold as the Russian climate. Napoleon, very much in his I can do anything mode, declared, I will bring Russia into the orbit of peace, and if necessary, by force. In 1812, he assembled La Grande Armée, largest military force in European history at the time. Over 600 soldiers from France, Italy, Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, Spain, from Paris to Moscow. The map looked like a straight line. The plan, strike fast, win fast, force the Tsar to sign a treaty. As easy as taking candy from a child. Just one small problem. The Russians refused to fight. They retreated, burned villages, destroyed supplies, abandoned cities. It was called scorched earth tactics, and yes, it was horrifyingly effective. Napoleon marched into Russia and couldn't find a single decisive battle. The deeper they went, the hungrier they became. Troops grew exhausted, sick, and so hungry they boiled their leather belts into soup. Finally, they clashed at Borodino, bloodiest battle in European history at that point. Napoleon won. But it was the kind of victory where you exhale and realize there's nothing left to win. Tens of thousands dead, both armies shattered. And then, he entered Moscow. The city was empty. Days later it burned. The entire city engulfed in flames set by the Russians themselves. No welcome, no citizens, no food, no winter shelter. Napoleon looked around, and for the first time in his life, didn't know what to do. He waited for the Tsar to surrender. 1 day, 2 days, 3 weeks. No one came. Alexander I, silent as the winter's death. And winter was coming. In October 1812, Napoleon ordered a retreat. No glory, no banners, no music, only frost, cold wind, and hunger. Temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. Horses died. Men died. Boots froze. Guns misfired. Soldiers perished in droves. They ate horse meat, Then, whatever was left, by the time they returned to France, La Grande Armée 600, Tititi, strong, had fewer than 100. Zero survivors. 1/6. All of Europe exhaled. Finally, he lost. That was the turning point. From here on, Napoleon was no longer the invincible god. The European powers, Prussia, Austria, Britain, Russia immediately united and struck hard. Napoleon fought back. Still won a few minor battles. But the empire had begun to crack. In 1814, he was forced to abdicate, exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy, a small, peaceful island where he was allowed to be a mini-king and rest. It seemed the story had ended. All of Europe popped champagne. But you remember, don't you? Napoleon never did sit still. Still with me? If your eyes are closed, picture yourself standing in the white fields of Russia, wind slicing your skin, and a lone figure on horseback, hunched in his cloak, glancing back at the burning Moscow, whispering, "I came to rewrite history, but I wrote it in blood and ice." Elba. 1814. A postcard, perfect place, blue sea, olive hills, soft Mediterranean breeze, and right in the middle of that piece, they dropped a tired military genius like a misdelivered Amazon package. That was Napoleon, the man who had marched to Moscow, now gifted a mini-kingdom, a handful of guards, and a polite, "Enjoy your retirement." Oh, yes. He had lost, but gracefully, no execution, no prison, just the world quietly turning off the lights and showing him out. But you know, Napoleon wasn't the beach holiday type. At Elba, instead of lounging in a hammock, he reorganized the local police, repaired roads, opened schools, wrote books, and followed French news like a superfan tracking their idol's chart drops. And then, one headline made him sit bolt upright. King Louis XVIII is ruling France, and doing terribly. People were starving. The army was restless. Citizens missed Napoleon like a banned buttery croissant. And he thought, I could go back. Just one more time. Then I'm done. Promise. On the 26th of February, 1815, Napoleon escaped Elba. No sneaking. No disguises. He boarded a ship, in uniform, with about 10 troops, and sailed straight for France. The French government panicked. They ordered his arrest, sent generals to intercept him. And then came a moment that entered legend. At Grenoble, Napoleon stepped out to face the unit sent to stop him. No weapons, no drawn swords. He opened his coat, slapped his chest, and shouted, "If you want to shoot your emperor, here I am." The soldiers knelt. No one fired. The whole unit joined him on the spot. From there, wherever he went, soldiers followed. Citizens threw flowers. And the government packed its bags. On the 20th of March, 1815, Napoleon returned to Paris. Not a single shot fired. Louis XVIII fled. And France lit up like New Year's fireworks. Newspapers wrote, "The monster has escaped Elba. Napoleon reaches Lyon. The emperor is marching on Paris. Napoleon at the palace. We love him again." And so began the legendary 100 Days. Napoleon reclaimed power, promising reforms, declaring peace, affirming, "I have not returned to conquer, but to complete an unfinished journey." It sounded heartfelt, but Europe didn't buy it. The coalition's Britain, Austria, Russia. Prussia met urgently and declared, "There's no coming back like nothing happened. See you on the battlefield." Napoléon chose to strike first. He marched into Belgium, intending to split British and Prussian forces before they could unite. Everything went nearly to plan, until the 18th of June. The Battle of Waterloo. A damp field, heavy with mud, gray skies, uncertain hearts. Napoleon faced the British under the Duke of Wellington, while Prussian forces advanced. That morning, he delayed the attack due to rain. Mud stalled the artillery. Soldiers slipped, cavalry sank. By afternoon, the Prussians arrived. Napoleon was no longer the general of Austerlitz, no longer had the same forces, no more time, and no more luck. By nightfall, his army had collapsed. Napoleon retreated. A few weeks later, he abdicated the crown for the second and final time, and the British said, "Last time, we sent him too close. This time, we have somewhere farther." Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena, tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic, nearly 2,000 kilometers from the nearest continent. No army, no wife, no one to command. There, he spent his final 6 years writing memoirs, walking the garden, and slowly fading. In 1821, he died. His final words, "Still, France, l'armée, tête d'armée, Joséphine." Oh, still with me? If you are, close your eyes and imagine a man who once brought Europe to its knees, now lying on a small island, his memories filled with battles, the cries of "Vive l'Empereur," and a heart that never truly rested. And so, we've walked through the life of Napoleon Bonaparte, from a skinny artillery lieutenant in Corsica to a legendary emperor, and back again to a solitary man, alone in the ocean wind.